Welcome to the AdNavseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, listeners, to episode 125 of the AdNavseam podcast. I'm down here in the bunker with my good friend and co-host, Dr. David Noe. How you feeling today, Dave?
I'm hanging in there.
All right, excellent.
Persevering.
Sometimes that's all we can ask
That's
for.
all we can. That's all you're asking of me today?
That is all I'm asking of you today.
I
right?
appreciate
I'm
that.
setting the bar, medium low. So for
setting the bar.
Yeah.
I thought you said sitting in the bar.
No. Setting the bar.
Setting the bar.
Yeah.
I found that the way to exceed expectations is just to keep them very low.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. I remember canceling a class.
Right.
So telling them on Wednesday, like, I can't be here Friday, and so we're not going to have class, and kind of that rush of relief that goes through them. Like,
yes.
wow, right? And so
they love it.
They love it, right? And so it's just kind of. There's a line in kind of an old Dilbert cartoon that says something about like canceling a meeting is just you're just torturing your employees less,
right?
And that's all they want is to be tortured less.
Well, it's kind of unique to education. Perhaps we have said this on the show before. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Education is one of the few things people are eager to pay for and then not receive.
It's very true.
Class is canceled. This is wonderful.
This is great.
I'll get nothing for my money.
Right.
Yeah.
I often feel that same rush myself as if I've made plans for a Friday night.
Yes.
And they fall through.
Yes.
It's like, thank goodness.
That's because you are a thoroughgoing introvert.
It is true.
Go out and have fun. It sounds appealing until the moment of truth arrives, and then I'd just rather stay home by my couch.
Exactly right. But it's kind of sad. It's like going to the gym too. Is like I often I don't want to do this, but I'm always glad I did.
Never regret having gone to the gym.
Never.
And speaking of going to the gym,
yes,
it's not time for the ads.
No,
but it is the subject of today's episode.
Yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about?
Well, first I need to ask how you're doing.
Oh, I'm doing very, very well.
Because that's the formula.
I'm loving the summer weather. I just this morning, my wife is out of town, and so I got myself and the boys out of the house. We went and did a hike around a lake up near Rockford, which is just north of Grand Rapids here. And it was wonderful. Mm-hmm. In the beautiful sunshine out under the trees. So I'm feeling invigorated.
Yes, Michigan summertime, what are we, mid-July almost? Mm-hmm. Can be very delightful.
It can be, right.
And in terms of very delightful, here's a segue. Next week, I am excited about this. We are having our second annual Colloquium Latinum Aestium, our summer Latin colloquium.
Fantastic.
So there are 12 scholars from around the nation convening in Woodland, Michigan.
Where's that?
Well, it's down near Hastings.
Okay, yeah.
And we're all going to live in this communal setting, 12 individuals in this really nice large house. And we're going to be studying Latin together for 5 days.
Wow.
6 or 7 intense sessions per day.
Man.
Well, with a great hospitality crew provided by my family. And Monday it's going to be Seneca. Mm-hmm. Tuesday, it's the Church Father Lactantius. Wednesday, Bernard of Clairvaux, or Bernie, as his friends called him.
Right.
Thursday, we're bringing back Erasmus, whom we studied last year. Mm-hmm. And Friday is Theodore Beza.
Nice. Excellent.
So running the gamut, the whole history, you might say, of the Latin language in a snapshot there.
That sounds fantastic. I'm surprised that Cicero didn't make the cut this year.
Well, he was there last year.
He was, okay.
And, I could study just Cicero all day, every day.
I know this.
But not everybody can do that.
Right.
We've got to have a little variety.
Excellent.
So it's going to be a really rip-roaring good time.
You people coming in from all across the country.
Let's see. Yeah, very convivial. Someone from Alabama, I think 4 individuals from North Carolina, 1 from Portland, Oregon.
Wow.
Some folks from, let's see, where else? Virginia, the state of Virginia. Mm-hmm. And just quite a cross-section of American Latinity.
Do you see, just from the few of the places you mentioned, do you see that as partly a reflection of some of this kind of this classical revival that I hear about, like in the southeast of the country?
I think so, but I think that's broader than just the southeast.
It is.
If we look at those who are downloading the AdNavseam podcast, it's not only the most populous states, it's also those where there is a large contingent of classical schools and people learning Latin, both public schools and classical schools. So California, Texas, Florida, Virginia, and New York.
Okay.
Those are not the most populous states, though they're pretty high. Mm-hmm. But that's where there's a lot of people studying Latin, listening to the podcast, and then some of them coming to study Latin with me next week.
Fantastic. Well, that sounds great.
So I'm very encouraged about that. I'll give a I'll give a report on that in a future episode and say how it went. The listeners might remember we talked about this a little bit last year.
Yeah. Now, is only Latin allowed to be spoken during these 5
We
years?
will have some Latin-only sessions for sure.
Yeah.
But no, it's going to be a mix. I don't draw a sharp line in the sand, you might say. I think that makes people too uncomfortable.
Yeah, I can
and
see
frankly,
that.
my skill level is not quite high enough to maintain that consistently without extreme fatigue.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
I mean, it can be done, but it's just very taxing. So we take breaks.
Yeah.
Speak some English.
Excellent. Well, that sounds great. I can't wait to hear the report.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
So you have tentatively entitled this one, Whoa, Milo. Come on, let's go.
Right. And I'm hoping that doesn't end up being the title because
I had to look it up because it was vaguely familiar. And then, of course, it's Kenny Loggins.
Yes.
It's the Footloose movie.
Yes, right.
And
right.
He needed something to rhyme, so he put in the name Milo.
Milo, I think Marie gets a rhyme in there.
Right.
I mean, that's a big...
Jack, get back.
Exactly, right. So it's a Jupiter-sized cheese ball of a song. But when I was thinking about Milo, unfortunately, that's what popped into my head.
That's what came to your mind.
So I penciled that in.
Okay, so between now maybe and when we drop this episode, we'll come up with something better, maybe?
I hope so.
Having said that now, we both know this is the title. Okay, so we're going to be talking about Milo. Who is he and why does anyone care?
Well, Milo is this legendary, or I guess semi-legendary athlete from the 6th century BC.
Okay.
He came from Sicily. And over the centuries, there were all these stories attached to him about his feats of strength and his the amount of drink and food he could put away,
right,
and all of these kind of crazy things. He's kind of a living day, real live, breathing Heracles.
Okay,
yeah. So
today's episode is devoted to the topic of athletics, you're saying?
Well, yeah, and specifically Milo's place in kind of the story of ancient athletics. I think I would love, someday on the pod to do an episode or two.
What, you're calling it the pod?
Did I say that? I'm
you
sorry.
Did.
I'm sorry, the podcast, right? Right. Thank you for checking me on that.
I'm just giving you grief.
I know, deservedly so. But to do an episode or two on the Olympic Games,
yes,
or the kind of the Pythian Games, or
right,
something along those lines. And so I think we'll dip into that a little bit today. But through the lens of this really interesting character of Milo of Croton.
Right.
Yeah.
So Croton in southern Italy.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
One of the many Greek colonies there in the boot.
Yep.
And so I think we should just jump right into it.
Yeah.
And Jeff, you have our opening quote. Is that right?
I do. This comes from an article called "On the Gluttony of Ancient Greek Athletes" by one Jan Bezant from a journal called Folia Philologica from way back in 1982.
Wow.
And he writes, "Athletics in Greece did not keep pace with the growing medical knowledge, nor did they profit very much from the experience accumulated by generations of Greek trainers. The myth was the main authority of Greek athletes, and Heracles their paragon, especially at the beginning in the 6th century BC. The depictions of athletes of that time clearly accentuate physical strength, the most frequent athletic types being boxers and wrestlers. This evidence is corroborated by contemporary literature, where, too, the typical athletic star is a strongman. Those famous athletes of the 6th century BC were celebrated in legends that spoke of their own tour de force and veracity. Greeks of that time delighted in stories about athletes who won a heifer and then ate it at a sitting."
So we pause there a minute.
Yeah.
So to win a heifer, this was a common prize,
right,
in some athletic competition, is livestock.
Yes, exactly, right.
A meal on the hoof.
Yes. So not to, I mean, I don't doubt the credentials of Mr. Bezant, but just in looking a little bit around, I couldn't find any other stories recorded about somebody getting a heifer and eating it in one sitting, except for about Milo.
I haven't heard that either, frankly, and
right.
I've looked into this a little bit.
Yeah.
Because remember when we were telling the story of Dares and Tellus,
yeah,
from the Aeneid,
yes,
and the killing of the prize steer, it wasn't a heifer, I think it was a steer, at the end, but no mention of eating it in one sitting.
No. So,
it's like when you drive through Amarillo, Texas. You ever been there?
I never have.
Okay, so you drive through Amarillo on your way from any point in the Midwest, maybe St. Louis or something, and you're going down into Texas, and through Amarillo, there are a number of famous steakhouses there.
Oh, yeah.
And the billboards line the expressway. If you eat the 72-ounce steak, it's free.
It's free.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Now, I haven't been through there in a long time, and it's something I've always wanted to try.
You want to try the 72-ounce?
I've wanted to try it, but I'm afraid I would probably fill up with salad first. That's probably what would happen.
Yeah. So
that's kind of like Milo. This would be right up his alley.
Oh, right, exactly. He would have no problem putting away a 72-ouncer. Right.
Yes.
All right. Carrying on. In short, these athletes behaved like Heracles in every detail. And that they were in dead earnest in doing this is proved by the case of Milo of Croton, outstanding athlete and no less famous trencherman. Now, that was a word I had to look up. Are you familiar with the term trencherman?
I think so. It means a guy that eats a lot.
Yes.
A trencherman.
I've never heard that before. I love the
you
word.
Like it?
I do.
Maybe it's because you dig a trench through your food with your spoon, like a man with a shovel.
Right.
That's probably not the etymology, but it's memorable, isn't it?
Plowing. Now, I'm never going to forget it, right? Right. So he was no less famous trencherman who in 511 BC fought the men of Sybaris with a club clad in the lion's fell. This Milo also made himself famous by lifting huge stones. And from Greece, there really come 3 stones, one weighing nearly 500 kilograms.
Yep.
Which I had to do my Google conversion.
Right.
That's 1,102 pounds.
Yes.
And these stones, they come with inscriptions announcing by whom they were lifted.
I guess if you lift it, then you get your name put on it.
I guess so.
Which is really impressive. And that's possible, I guess.
I was going to ask you because,
right.
I mean, I don't know... like weightlifting records.
Yes.
That sounded absurd to me.
Well, it is very, very high, but deadlifting 1,000 pounds has been done.
It has.
Yes, it's very uncommon. I mean, it's unbelievable. I could say it's Herculean, but that would just be too on the nose.
Right.
But, it's different to lift something that's strapped on a barbell when you have lots of modern technologies and to lift a stone.
Yeah.
But maybe what counts as lifting it is just getting it off the ground a little bit.
I guess so.
I don't know.
Right.
Today's strongman competitions use what's called an atlas stone, which is a sphere. It's shaped into a sphere, and it's a stone, and you have to lift it and move it around. It does not weigh 1,000 pounds, but deadlifting 1,000 pounds or 1,100 pounds has been done.
It has been done. Okay, so it's not like the stories like that famous long jumper who jumped 60 feet,
right?
Say, right, which is twice as long as the modern record.
I've never heard that one.
Oh, we should bring that up at some time.
Okay.
Right? So I mean, just in short, I love to bring up this story in my myth class when we talk about Zeus in the Olympic Games. And there's this fascinating detail is that with the Olympic Games, so many records survive. At least lists of victors, and in some cases they have. Even distances recorded of how far they threw the discus or the javelin. And what's really interesting is that if you take their measurements and you translate them to feet and inches, the distance for the javelin and the discus, that size and that weight of a thing, you can imagine an athlete throwing that. And then it comes to the long jump, which the Greeks apparently use these hand weights in jumping.
Only for training. The hand weights were for training, were they not?
We don't know that.
Oh, okay.
So some have speculated that it was part of the actual jump. And there's a record that's recorded of somebody who jumped and went outside the pit and landed somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 feet.
Oh my!
In a jump, maybe with weights in his hands, which is impossible.
So what is it today? It's something like a little bit over 30?
It is 29 feet, 4.5 inches.
Bob Beeman was the first guy, wasn't he?
He had that long-standing record, and then Mike Powell broke it in 1991.
Wow.
So it's one of the longer-standing track and field records over 30 years now.
But it's half.
Right.
Of the supposed ancient record.
Right. So the puzzle is that, if the discus measurements make sense,
right?
What happened when this guy
Someone,
jumped,
forgot to carry the one or over-carried the one or something. Slipped in the inscription or had too much wine when he wrote down the numbers. I don't know.
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But I think there's the general impression that athletes today are better than athletes of old, just as we have the general impression that people today are smarter than people of old.
Right.
But then we find these records which show in some categories, in some places, the athletes of the past were at least equal and perhaps, leaving aside the 60-foot long jump, superior.
Superior, right. No, I think that too. I even think in terms of this past April when I was standing in the shadow of the Parthenon,
right?
And thinking, do we build things like this anymore?
No.
Could we build things like this anymore? I don't think we could.
You don't think it could be done?
Well, maybe with some laser precision,
right?
carved.
Well, they are refurbing it, right? They are remaking the pieces.
True enough.
But not with technology from the 5th century.
No, exactly. With hammers and chisels.
Right.
And so I think that, do we do those things?
No.
Maybe we can do them, but do we do them better?
No.
I don't think we do.
No, I don't think so either.
Right. So it's humbling.
Yep.
Humbling. Let me just finish the quote here. So, this too was a competition in physical exercises. The form of letters date all these stones within the 6th century BC. Which is to the time of Milo.
So that's 599 to 501.
Yes.
So everyone's on the same page.
But athletes lifting stones are also depicted on 5th century BC vases. And even in the 2nd century BC, There were some lithoboloi.
Yep.
Stone chuckers.
Stone chuckers, like a shot put, right? Like a shot put.
Exactly. Among the athletes attending the Ephebic Games at Samos.
Yeah. So I was watching the U.S. Track and Field National Championships, which were going on in Eugene, Oregon this previous week.
Oh, really?
Yes. You didn't know about this?
I didn't. I love that stuff. I love that stuff. I'm sorry.
Watch the replays on YouTube. They're phenomenal.
Yeah.
So some really fascinating races and fascinating individuals competing. Mm-hmm. And Ryan Krauser, right, whose name I'm sure has never been mentioned on this podcast, is the U.S. champion in shot put, and he's one of a kind. Apparently, nobody's like him. So he'd fit right in here. He's like a modern day Milo.
Yeah. Were any records set at the meet? Do you know? Did you see?
One record was set in that a 19-year-old won the 200 meter.
Really?
Competition, a man named Arian Knighton, 19 years old.
Wow.
And he's the fastest man in the world at that distance.
Man, that's amazing. Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Yeah, incredible. Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out.
You'll have to check those out.
Do you have a favorite event?
I like the running events.
You do?
I get real impatient with things that take time. So the triple jump, I can't understand that. I just can't get into the triple jump.
That is an odd thing.
It just seems so awkward, right?
Yeah.
The first leap of the 3 jumps, I think that's it. But no, there's 2 more.
There's hopping involved.
Exactly. So, and I like the middle distance. I think the strategy that goes into running, say the 1,500 meter or the 5,000, that's really impressive.
Exactly. How do you conserve that energy, and then where do you just turn on all the gas?
Right. How do they have anything left?
I know.
After all?
I know.
It's astounding.
Yeah, I would love to attend one day just to be on the ground to really see how fast they're going. Because I think when you see it, on the screen, you don't really get a sense of
deceptive because they're all running roughly the same rate.
Right.
So then, from the opening quote from Mr. Jan Bazant, we learn that Milo was sui generis in terms of his athleticism and in terms of his appetite.
Yes.
And that these men were imitating Hercules.
Yeah.
Right? To them, he was a living figure, a living legend, a historical individual that they wanted to emulate.
Right. Yeah. And so I think he's also one of these guys that, was there an actual Milo? I think that probably most historians who worry about this stuff would probably say yes.
Okay.
But can you cut through the fog of exaggeration to get to the real man? That's a whole other question.
Right.
So I was trying to think of kind of a modern corollary, and the one that struck me was maybe somebody like Babe Ruth.
Yes.
I read a biography.
Muhammad Ali, perhaps?
Yeah, that's another good one.
Except all of his fights and everything is so carefully recorded by that time.
Right. So, you don't have the same kind of problem. But I remember reading a biography of Babe Ruth and about the stories circulating about how many hot dogs he ate and how much beer he drank in one sitting. And, he had these prodigious Milo-like appetites.
Right.
And, he lived kind of just before... or his career was before television.
Right.
And so it was
before everything was filmed.
Right, exactly. I mean, like Ali was, he was always being filmed. He was very aware he's being filmed and was kind of aware of his own myth making. But, the stories about Babe Ruth, his famous called shot that, he kind of pointed to the right field stands in Wrigley Field in 1934 and he says next pitch is going out and he hits it.
Right.
Was it true? People who were there said yes he did. Others say no he didn't. And so I thought, Ruth is kind of like a modern day Milo.
I see.
Perhaps. Yeah.
Semi-liminal, right?
So, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
So where are we going from here then?
Well, I thought we could talk maybe a little bit about the centrality of athletics and sport.
Let's do that.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you remember your first visit to Olympia?
I do. It was, I remember when I went to Greece as a student,
right.
We were handcuffed by the first Iraq war and we did not make it to Olympia. I was very disappointed. So the first time I was there was with the first student group I took over there, and it was magnificent.
Yes.
It's still one of my favorite places to go back to.
So in the West Peloponnese, on kind of a large alluvial plain, right? There's lots of tall grass. There's no mountains in that part of Greece. For the most part, there's some rolling hills.
Yes. It's
a big flat spot, kind of, although riven with earthquakes. And I guess a lot of destruction has taken place on the site of Olympia because of those earthquakes.
Yes, and in more recent times, the forest fires.
Right.
Yeah, really threatened it.
Yes, so the first time that I was there was in 2011 with you, actually.
I think that's...
It was the first time I visited.
Okay, yes. That wasn't my first time, but it was not far from that.
Second or third.
Yeah.
So what is the impact that it makes on you when you first arrive there? Expectations versus reality. What would you say?
I think what really struck me was kind of the serenity of the site. And one of the things I really like about Olympia is there's the modern town of Olympia, this tiny kind of 2-street town.
Right.
but
devoted entirely to tourism.
Exactly. But the archaeological site is next door,
right?
And so you don't have some of these sites where you have the excavation that's part of the town square, and the modern and the ancient are fused together. No, it's completely separate. And kind of walking down that path as you enter the site, and just, hearing the birds chirping and hearing the babbling of the rivers that meet there, you can. I felt at a moment, okay, I can see why the Greeks considered the site sacred.
Yes.
How about you?
Well, I had that impression, and then the size of the complex was also impressive. It's a very large complex. I didn't expect it to be like this, and you can see the ruins and the foundations of the different places. I think it's the Xenodochium, the guest house where
huge.
Yeah, where if you were visiting, this is the luxury quarters, and then there's the I think it's the Philippeion, the little
the circular,
yes, the
monument.
Tholos monument that Philip II dedicated, and I can still remember walking through the arched entryway into the field of Olympia itself, and learning for the first time that yes, there is some evidence that the Greeks knew how to construct with arches. But they just didn't want to. It's not as much of an innovation with the Romans as was previously believed.
That's how I learned it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then looking out over the size of the Olympic Stadium itself, and getting to run on the Olympic Stadium with the other students, and then with my kids, later on, and it's really impressive.
It is.
It makes a deep impact.
Right. It is a site that has been devastated by earthquakes. I mean, almost everything on the main sanctuary site has been leveled to the ground.
Right.
You remember at the the Temple of Zeus there, which was most famous in antiquity for the great statue.
Yes, by Phidias.
They have set up
Phidias Cent. Is that the guy's name? Who?
Phidias Cent. Well, I'm missing a joke here.
Not a good one. The American rapper. 50 Cent.
50 Cent. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Right. So, but you remember they have set up a one column, kind of a rebuilt column, just to give you a sense of kind of how tall it was.
But all the drums there, just all they're Doric, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
just littering the place, just incredible.
And kind of dominoed out where they fell, 1,500 years ago.
Right,
and so
highly pitted by the weather and the rain and so forth, and filled with moss and other kinds of vegetation, but still incredibly impressive.
Very impressive. Right? As I always say to my students that, you either kind of find a kind of a haunting, tragic beauty in that,
right,
or you say, oh, well, what a shame that fell down. I wish I could see it standing.
Right.
And not that those two things had to be exclusive.
Yeah, can't you feel both?
You can feel both, but
right.
When I see those scalloped out columns, there's just I find there's something quite beautiful about
I agree.
that. Yeah.
And then you get to go inside the museum and you get to see both of the friezes, right?
Yeah.
With the famous battle of the Lapis and Centaurs and that very dramatic Apollo.
Right. In that wonderful room, which is built along the same dimensions as the temple itself.
Correct.
It's really, really well
with
done.
all the Hercules, the 12 labors there from the Metopes.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to Milo.
Yes, exactly. So Milo, he was, just looking at here, apparently a 6-time Olympic victor. So he said that he won 6 laurel wreaths there, which I guess I don't know my history well enough to say. I mean, that sounds very impressive.
Right.
Imagine somebody winning 6 gold medals across a few.
Carl
Olympiads.
Lewis, Usain Bolt, Michael Phelps.
Michael Phelps, right? That's in that kind of category. But when I was reading about this, my sense is that was almost unheard of.
Right.
But he falls into that category of the strongman, the brawn type of hero, right? And so you can often look at a Greek hero story, and the character will usually fall into kind of the brawn strongman type category,
Achilles,
or the trickster category,
right? Odysseus,
and some that kind of straddle that fence. And I think if you looked across kind of mythologies around the world, you'd find a similar kind of thing.
Okay,
and so he reminds me a lot of Enkidu, from the Babylonian myths, or someone like Samson, right, in the Hebrew tradition,
in the Book of Judges,
right. And it struck me that
although Samson has his moments of craftiness too,
sure,
as when he takes the fox's tails and ties them together and sets them on fire,
right,
and the way that he successfully parries Delilah's tricks, for several rounds until eventually he's overcome,
right. Exactly. In the same way that Heracles too is he's not remembered for being the most clever guy, but he tricks Atlas,
yes,
right, with the apples.
He cleans the Augean stables with a brief moment of hydraulic engineering.
Yeah, so he's not without his metis.
But I definitely agree that he's by and large the brute.
Yes,
not the brains.
Right, exactly. Right, and if I was thinking about if you compare a lot of strongmen figures from across traditions, one of the things that they share is that they kind of come from nature.
Okay,
they belong in nature. So Heracles, what's his main weapon? It's the club.
Right.
a branch snapped out of a tree.
Yes. It is the stump of the tree itself.
The stump. Okay.
If I can be a little pedantic, which is what I do, right?
Right.
It's the olive tree itself. He rips it up by the roots.
So it's even more impressive.
Exactly. Because the olive tree, is so tenacious.
Exactly.
You can't kill it.
But he can just rip it out with one hand. Or if you think about Samson using the jawbone,
right,
as a weapon. So there's something with the strongman characters, they belong in nature, right? Mm-hmm. But there's often an element of these stories is that they want to be civilized, or they want to be accepted in that world. Enkidu goes to the town of Gilgamesh and ends up teaming up with him.
This is the town where Gilgamesh lives, or is the name of the town Gilgamesh?
No, Gilgamesh is the king. The town is Uruk.
Okay.
And which you could arguably, in terms of its written form, is the oldest story in the Middle Eastern Western tradition.
The listeners are thinking, does Dr. Noe not know anything about Babylonian myth?
Did you ever include Gilgamesh in your reading?
I taught it briefly in one section of History of Western Civ or something, but frankly, I remember little of it.
Gotcha.
As you can tell.
Right.
But you've taught it multiple times.
I have. I will often, at least.
In translation.
In translation, of course. Right. Or if you think about, Samson, him, getting together with Delilah and having his hair cut, is, I think, a symbol of him being civilized, but it destroys him.
Right. It's the breaking of the vow.
Right. And so, Heracles too, he wants to be, he tries to learn how to play the lyre. He gets frustrated. He kills his lyre teacher.
Linus is the guy he kills.
Right. Yep. He gets married twice, and both of those marriages end in disaster. The first for his family, and the second leads to his own death.
Right.
And so I saw that too kind of replicated in the life of Milo, is that he dies young. We'll talk about his famous death story. But he never kind of fully integrates into that world outside of being a strong man.
So to psychologize it, is this kind of an inevitable consequence of megalomania? In order to be extremely good at one thing, right, you have to shut out all other normal kinds of activities?
Yeah.
I remember when it was, in the 2000s, and it was my first academic job, and I think it was right about the time that Michael Jordan, of course, he could sue us for everything we're worth, which isn't much. But when he left the NBA and then came back or something.
Yeah, he went to play baseball.
Yeah, and I asked, that was a little bit earlier, but then he came back and played for the Wizards and bought the Bobcats, I don't know. But and I said, so what's going on there? He's got so much money. Why doesn't he just do something else? And somebody who knew this world quite a bit better than I did, had interacted with some celebrity athletes, told me that's all they know how to do. It's not that he needs the money or the attention. It's just that's the only thing that he really.
It's the only world he knows.
It's so important to him. It's a compulsion, kind of.
That's really.
I don't know if that's true.
Yeah,
but it seems like a way to understand someone like Milo. You're really good at athletics, and then you're not normal in other categories because you don't have that capacity.
Right. And that comes at, there's a trade-off. There's a cost with that.
Right.
When I teach my film course, when we covered the American Western, there's this phrase that comes up a lot called the paradox of the gunslinger. And so you often will have these characters in these American Westerns who they're really good at shooting and killing people.
Okay.
Right. And so then they come up against kind of the wildness of the West, the town that needs to be tamed.
Right.
They bring in the gunslinger because he acts kind of above the law.
Right.
And because he does what he needs to do to get rid of the enemy, get rid of the robbers, the thieves, tame the town.
We all need someone like that.
Right. But then what happens usually at the end of the movie is that the day has been saved, but the gunslinger doesn't belong there anymore. He's he's restored law and order, but he's someone who doesn't play by the rules of law.
He can't function within it.
Right. So it's almost every character that John Wayne ever played. He saves the day, but at the end he's got to leave. Yeah,
riding off into the sunset is not so much a kind of a tip of the hat to his greatness.
Right.
It's like a necessity.
Yes.
He's got to leave. You can't stay here.
Right.
You don't fit in the world you've created.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, even that, like riding off to the sunset. I think when most people hear that, it sounds romantic.
It sounds like a parade, kind of.
But it's really quite tragic.
Right.
Yeah. And so I thought that struck me too. Like Michael Jordan, Milo here, they're great at what they do and they're celebrated for what they do in that arena. Mm-hmm. But because of kind of their greatness, it alienates themselves. It alienates them from so much of kind of regular civilized society.
Right.
So there is a mythic moral, I think, embedded in these kinds of stories that you see not just in the Greeks but around the world.
Right. So you could bring up another individual here, just to get further afield, and that is the comedian Jim Carrey.
Okay.
Who apparently said that he wished everyone could become rich and famous, so they could see how worthless it is.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really interesting.
It's quite insightful.
Yeah. I've heard that he was this recent, because I've heard that
It was in the last few years.
Yeah, Jim Carrey is kind of he's got no filter
anymore.
Well,
you grow a beard, you do some painting, which I think is his hobby.
Okay.
And suddenly you're a philosopher.
Right,
so.
Of course. Right. Oh, that's really interesting. Well,
before we move to the next section,
yeah.
I want to just provide the listener here with a little bit of a mnemonic, which has helped me immensely. And that is, there are 4 major games, right?
Yes.
There are 4 major games, and they are the Pythian, the Olympic, the Nemean, and the Isthmian, which if you put them out in that way, right, it's pony. It spells pony, P-O-N-I.
Yes.
So that for me has been, a mnemonic for remembering the 4 major games, because not ponies, but horses raced at these. And I believe I have visited each one of these sites.
I was just going to ask you.
Yes.
Because I've only been to Olympia and Delphi, where the Pythian games were. I've not been to the other 2.
The Isthmian games were at Corinth.
But where's the stadium?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's not on the Acrocorinth. It's down somewhere in the vicinity of the city. We're probably showing our ignorance here. How many times have I been? I think I've been to Corinth 6 times. I've never been on the site. Perhaps it's not excavated.
Maybe not. I have to admit, every time I've been to Corinth, I'm never thinking about the Isthmian games.
No, but
right.
that's the area.
Okay.
The Nemean games are on the Peloponnese, and that's where he supposedly slew the lion.
Yes.
And I did have a chance to visit Nemea. It was, I think, it would have been 2015. So when I was there with former colleague Young Kim, who no doubt listens to every one of these episodes.
Of course.
Right.
I'm just assuming.
And a young girl who was on the trip with us, her grandfather had passed away, and she wanted to fly home for his funeral.
Oh, wow.
And so I was tasked with taking her from where we were in Nafplio, drove her back to the airport in Athens.
Okay.
It all worked out very nicely, for her, thankfully, and for me, it was fine.
Yeah.
And then when I came back, I took the extra time to stop off in Nemea and tour that site.
Wow.
Which is very small compared to Olympia, but impressive. And it has its own little covered archway, sort of, for entering the stadium.
Okay.
And there's a nice temple there for, I think it's a Temple of Hercules there at Nemea.
Interesting. Did you have the place to yourself?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, in January, there were maybe 2 other people on the whole site.
That's one of the wonderful things about going to those places.
Actually, now that I check, Jeff,
yes,
I'm not correct. It's not a temple of Hercules at Nemea. It's a temple of Zeus.
Okay.
Hercules' father.
Right. I guess in those cases where you have to guess, I mean, I would...
Go with Zeus?
Go with Zeus, right. So it's a temple of Zeus.
Yes.
But I mean, I would have to imagine there's got to be, or were shrines to Heracles in the area, because of his association with the spot.
Right. So the bottom line is pony.
Pony.
This is how you can remember pony, Pythian, Olympic, Nemean, and Isthmian.
Right.
So the Pythian games were at Delphi, right? And we've seen those. We've been there. Climb up the hill on the sacred site on Mount Parnassus all the way to the top. Later developed by the Romans, excavated further and expanded. But these are the 4 biggies.
Which do you prefer? Do you prefer the kind of the natural bowl of the Olympic Stadium, or that more kind of Romanized with the stone seating stadium at Delphi?
Well, I prefer the natural bowl, but at Olympia, where there were no stands, right? That was one of the other misimpressions that I had when coming to Olympia, is that there were bleachers. But no, there's no bleachers, right? The spectators just sat on the grass embankment.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
But I think that the shrine of Apollo at Delphi is much more impressive.
It's much more dramatic.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because of its elevation.
Right. And then when you climb all the way up to the top of the hill, if you didn't know it was up there, it's almost shocking that there's this full-size stadium waiting for you.
Right.
Not that far from the top of the mountain.
Right. Because I thought that was the athletic event, was just climbing up there.
Yeah, seriously. Right. All right. Let's talk some Milo.
Okay.
Right. So, according to tradition, Milo was born in the Greek colony of Croton in southern Italy. Like we said, he was a 6-time Olympic victor. He won once for wrestling in 540 BC at the 60th Olympiad.
Is this when he was still a boy, a young man?
I don't know if we have like set dates for Milo.
Okay,
but it's for boys wrestling, so it must maybe kind of a lower another category perhaps. And then he won 5 times in wrestling at the 62nd through the 66th Olympiads.
Wow.
Right? So that's, I mean, again, to compare that to modern day, that's not unheard of. If you think of, like we mentioned Michael Phelps. I mean, he competed at a number of Olympiads.
Right.
But the
Tour de France winner, Lance Armstrong, won so many times. Now, I mean, the truth about him we know.
Right.
But still, he may not have been the only one doing that kind of thing, and it was still quite a competition. Or you add up the number of Grand Slams for tennis.
Yes.
Right. You got the big four, Djokovic and Roger Federer, and who's the other guy?
I'm not
Rafael Nadal. You don't follow tennis?
I don't. I mean, I know who all 3 of those guys are, but I couldn't have.
For you, it's just 3. Like ping pong on a large scale,
something like that.
Okay.
Right. But that's then as now, the exception, not the rule.
Right.
The career of a typical Olympic athlete is very short. Right. There's always somebody stronger and faster coming up behind you, and and certainly in kind of the strength and speed events, your life on top is going to be probably going to be very short.
Your days are numbered.
Right.
Yeah.
So then beyond that, it's the tradition says that Milo kept on competing. Well beyond what was considered a normal athletic career.
So people were asking him to retire. Come on already, just hang up your cleats.
Yeah, exactly.
But he kept going.
Right. So I mean, how many athletes can you? We were talking about this is the only world they know. When people kind of complain about why does Brett Favre keep retiring and coming back? Well, what else do they know?
What do you want him to do?
What is he going to do? Right?
Yeah, you think he should have finished law school by now?
Right, exactly. So, but I think that's. I mean, I haven't really thought about it in that way. But if that's the world, if you're a professional athlete, chances are you've been groomed for this since you were a little kid, right? And so that's the only world you know. And so what are you supposed to do when your life is quote unquote over at age 34? Right. So
I think this is why when the storytelling that goes into watching sports, professional sports, if you've ever watched, we were talking about track and field or any of these kinds of sports, there's a lot of storytelling that goes into the broadcasters.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's not just they competed in the event and here are the results. They have to build a lot of drama around it. Of course. Family member died, they had a baby, there's a broken relationship, whatever.
Exactly.
And that's really understandable. But one of the themes that always emerges is, I think, how normal they are off the field. At least that's what they want us to believe.
Yes.
Have you noticed that?
Yes,
that's
I have.
one of the common story arcs.
Yes, absolutely.
And they even, as I was watching the track and field championships, they talk about it in a way that's supposed to be surprising. Not only are they great on the field, but look at how they are off the field of play.
Yes.
And I think it's trying to normalize something that's so unusual.
Exactly. No, I think that's very true. I noticed a lot of that. I watched recently a documentary on Nolan Ryan.
Oh, yeah, the pitcher.
The great pitcher. And I thought of Nolan Ryan in reading about Milo, too, because he's one of these rare guys that pitched well into his 40s. And I think he even threw his last no-hitter when he was 42.
Now, was he the Iron Horse?
No, that's Lou Gehrig.
So who's Cal Ripken?
Cal Ripken he broke the record of the Iron Horse.
Okay.
And so he was I think they call Ripken the Iron Man.
The Iron Man.
Yes.
It's a lot of nicknames.
Right. So Lou Gehrig was one of the records he set was the consecutive games played. Never missed a game. And that's the big record that Ripken broke.
Okay. But Nolan Ryan,
like Ripken too, who played a very long time and for the most part fairly well. And so Ryan throwing a no hitter in his 40s, nobody does that anymore.
That's incredible.
And if you look at
except Tom Brady, he's throwing a no hitter.
Right. Well, Brady's again one of these guys that. Yeah, I'm retiring or I'm not retiring. He comes back. Is Brady 40 now?
Oh, yeah, he's over 40.
He's over 40. And to be an NFL quarterback, it's that sport.
Right.
The punishment on your body is ridiculous.
It is.
But if you look at in Nolan Ryan's record, he holds the record for most strikeouts. It's something like 5,700. And the guy that's in second place has a little over 4,000. It's not. It's
so they'll never get close.
Not even close. And
could take another 100 years for someone to come close.
Exactly. So he's one of these guys. But in that documentary, who is he? Oh, he's just a good old boy.
Right.
He's a Texas boy. He just wants to raise his chickens.
Right. He's just like the rest of us.
Right. And so when they interview
so
him,
why do you think it's done like that? Why do you think that's the story arc?
Well, I think we have these
Because we have to be able to relate?
Yes. Well, I think we have this desire, humans have this desire that we want our heroes to be special, but we also want them to be like us too, right? And so, have you ever heard that phrase, never meet your heroes?
Oh, yes.
Right. So, have you ever met one of your heroes and been like either thrilled or disappointed?
Yeah. When I went to Greece with Ken Tamplin 4 years ago.
Well,
my musical hero. Well,
but that's different because he's a friend of yours.
Yeah, he is.
Right. So that's different than just like meeting
so that's
on the street.
Multiple dynamics, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So one of your heroes, who's that guy for Coldplay or Dead Day or Green Hour? What's...
None of those guys are my heroes. I don't know what you're talking about.
Some musician.
Like
Chris Martin.
Ben Folds?
I don't know.
Okay, Ben Folds is one of my heroes.
Isn't Chris Martin a musician?
He is, but he's not a hero of mine.
Okay.
All right. But I met...
Tough crowd.
I met my... if I had to pick one of my musical heroes, Ben Folds, a pop piano musician who is wonderful.
And you met him?
Well, I met him at a signing.
Right.
That doesn't really count.
He didn't recognize you?
Well, he didn't recognize me, and you don't. There's no interaction, right?
Right.
And so, but I think that a lot of people would love to meet their heroes, but would like to, I had a conversation with, fill in the blank, and it was, he was just a normal dude, and stuff like that.
So Nolan Ryan has got to be a normal dude,
right?
In order for us to relate to his athletic accomplishments.
I think that just to say that he's like, I think there's also there's kind of an American myth that like any of us can do this.
I see.
It's kind of an everyman myth that's embedded, but in this,
which is clearly not true.
No, of course it's not.
None
true.
of us could be Michael Phelps.
No,
right?
None of us could be Nolan Ryan.
Right.
But it's funny when they interview him in this documentary. He's now in his like mid upper 70s, and he's so blasé about everything that he did. I'm just what I really want to do. I want to play with my grandkids, and I want to raise my hogs, and
it's
just he's just a Texan boy.
Yeah.
And
that's endearing.
It
I
is
suppose.
Very endearing. Right?
But if he hadn't done unbelievable things in the game of baseball, nobody would care.
Of course. He'd just be another dirt farmer.
Right. Well, that's interesting.
So I collected some things that some ancient authors of kind of the anecdotes that they collected and passed down about Milo. Apparently, a lot of people were fascinated by not just his athletic feats, but how much he could eat and drink.
Right.
So Athenaeus...
Like that young Japanese guy who's probably not young anymore.
Which guy?
The guy who eats 65 hot dogs every 4th of July.
Oh, right. I heard something about kind of a recent contest. I think that guy's retired now or
probably.
Dead.
No, he's not dead. We're talking about Takeru Kobayashi.
That's the guy.
Yeah, born in 1978, ate 50 hot dogs in 12 minutes.
Wow.
I can't eat one hot dog in 30 minutes. I don't like them.
You don't really?
No, but 50 in 12 minutes.
That's crazy.
So Milo.
Right, Milo. Right. So Athenaeus says that he could eat 20 minae of meat.
Mm-hmm. It's like $300 worth of meat.
Right. Or like 20 pounds of meat,
right.
Roughly. An equal quantity of bread.
Yeah, so he did fill up on bread.
Right. And then he washed it all down with 3 koes of wine.
Yeah, that's like 3 liters.
Oh, my goodness. Right. So he could put it away.
Well, lifting 1,000-pound stone is going to create a real need for some caloric intake.
So you need your protein.
Right.
But you also need the quick carbs.
You need the carbs, right, to rebuild.
Right, exactly.
And you need the wine for...
To dull the pain?
I don't know. So you can sleep it off.
I guess so. Right. Pliny also talks about Milo.
You mean Pliny.
Pliny.
Right?
Is that Dennis Miller?
Dennis Miller. Is this Pliny the Elder or Pliny the Younger?
Pliny the Younger. This is Pliny the Elder.
Okay.
He said Milo is said to have worn the gizzard stones of roosters about him in order to render himself invincible in his athletic contests.
Where does the invincibility come from?
That struck me. He's superstitious.
Yeah,
like so many athletes, especially baseball players.
Yes,
right?
They have to put their shoes on the same way. They have to hold the bat the same way.
Right.
You know what a gizzard stone is, right?
Is it something in the neck or the throat?
Well, birds do not have teeth, so they can't grind their feed.
Oh, okay.
They have this little pouch in their throat called a gizzard, and they ingest tiny little pebbles. And then when the food goes down in there, the pebbles in there grind the food up before it passes into the rest of their body.
Ah, there you go. Okay, so that's the gizzard stone.
That's a gizzard stone.
Okay, so apparently they were thought to have magical, maybe apotropaic properties.
I think so.
But it's superstitious. Like, do you remember the Detroit Tigers manager, Sparky Anderson?
I do.
And so every time he would go out to the mound to consult with a pitcher,
he ate he was always chewing on 4 or 5 bushels of tobacco at the same time.
Exactly. It's spitting all over the place. But I think if you went to YouTube, you could find a supercut of Sparky going to the mound. And every time he goes, and before he reaches the chalk third baseline, he does a little kind of stumble step over it. He'll kind of come up to it, but then he'll kind of hop over the line and never step on it. And it was one of his kind of like, you step on the line, your pitcher's,
not doing fine.
Not doing fine, exactly.
So this is why, because he observed that so carefully, the Tigers won like 5 World Series in a row, right?
Well, they won 1 World Series with Sparky, but probably because he never stepped on the line.
Oh, I'm sure that was the cause.
Yeah. So that's what I saw in this. Milo, he's superstitious.
Yeah. Pausanias, what does Pausanias, the Greek historian, say?
This is perhaps my favorite story about Milo. It says he could tie a string or a ribbon around his forehead, and he could snap it off simply by holding his breath and expanding the blood vessels in his temples.
That's incredible. Can you do anything like that?
No, nothing like that.
That's incredible.
But can't you imagine this guy with this giant noggin just going red and just like popping off his head?
It's incredible.
Pausanias, the great travel writer.
Right.
Actually,
you read the Pausanias one.
Cicero. He says that on another occasion, Milo was said to have lifted a fully grown 4-year bull, slung it across his shoulders, carried it around the stadium in Olympia, which astonished the crowd. And then he proceeded to kill it, cut it up, and eat it in the span of a single day.
The entire bull.
Right. So
he grilled it first, right?
I hope he grilled it. He didn't eat it raw.
No.
But out there in the stadium, with the apron on.
That's incredible.
Grilling.
So this is from Cicero's speech Pro Milona, right? Where he is defending Milo against the charge of murder.
There you go.
Of Clodius, right?
Right.
And the whole defense, not the whole defense, but the really juicy part, so to speak, is when he says, my client, Milo, the Roman politician accused of murder, has the same name as the ancient athlete Milo. Here's a great story about the ancient athlete Milo. Therefore, my client is innocent.
Wow, is that really the connection?
Basically, that's it. And of course, Cicero knows it's all baloney,
right?
Or beef jerky, but it's funny,
right? He knows how to work a crowd.
He does,
yeah.
And this story about the bull, is partly the old myth that if you pick something up when it's small, as it grows, you will continue to be able to pick it up. It's the Sorites problem, if I can explain that for a minute.
Please.
When I was young and growing up on the farm, we raised some calves, from the time they're deacons, just weaned off their mothers until they were steers and then full-grown cattle. And my uncle said to me, if you go and you pick that one up now, he only weighs like 80 pounds. You can probably do it. You pick him up every day. When he's full-grown, you'll be able to pick him up. And I thought, there's something wrong about that. But I don't know exactly how to refute it. And the interesting thing was, I don't think my uncle had any knowledge of classical myth or these kinds of stories, a story of Milo.
Yeah.
But somehow it had crept into consciousness of people so much that he was familiar with that story.
It kind of becomes like a folk wisdom.
Correct.
Yes.
Because the idea is, you can always lift 1 more pound. Right. It's only 1 more pound.
Yeah, come on.
And sometimes they don't even gain a pound per day. Can't you lift 1 more pound? So I don't know why it doesn't work, but it doesn't. It's like the Zeno paradox with the the arrow. Zeno of Elea, the arrow gets shot.
Oh,
and so forth.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah. We got another Cicero quote here.
Yeah, this is from his
De Senectuta,
yes.
right, on old age. Mm-hmm. But speaking of old age,
yes,
it's time for the ads.
Let's do it. This episode of AdNavseam is brought to you by Ratio Coffee. Dave, I think I mentioned in the last episode, I received my metal carafe.
Yes, I remember that.
And I'm loving this. It's a total game changer for me. Right. So my wife she's off out west on a class trip for her school.
She's bringing law and order to some Wild West little town. Is
exactly.
she the gunslinger?
She is living the paradox of the gunslinger out there. While I, back home, get the whole pot of coffee to myself.
Nice job.
Right. So just today, I got that going around 7:30 this morning.
Okay.
And I was sipping on brew well until after lunch.
And it was still warm.
It was still hot.
That's incredible.
Exactly. So I love that thing as my latest addition to my Ratio 8.
So just this past weekend, actually, it was the 4th of July weekend to Jeff.
Yeah.
I'm reading through the Wall Street Journal's weekend edition in the off-duty section, and guess what I come across?
What?
A review of the Ratio 8.
Oh, I'm assuming it was glowing.
It was glowing.
All right.
Yes, it said words to this effect, this is a life-changing coffee machine. It's an automatic pour-over. It didn't get into the borosilicate glass and the Fibonacci head and all the stuff that we do.
Yes.
But it was very prominently featured there as a fantastic machine. So excellent. I had a little sense of satisfaction. That's my machine.
Yes.
Right. We're the podcast that's promoting this, and there it is in the big newspaper.
That's excellent. That's really cool to hear. Yeah. So I love my Ratio 8. I know you love your Ratio 8. I had the Ratio 6 for a while. It's
right.
its younger brother, which is also a fantastic machine.
And what's that doing now? Just cooling its heels?
It's on the shelf.
Did you loan it out to a friend or something?
I need to figure out what to do with it.
You do. Share some of the love.
I'm also loath to give it up for some reason. Right. So, but listener, if you want one of these excellent machines, what you should do is go to ratiocoffee.com, pick the one you want, drop it in your little satchel there, and if you type in this code, ANCO6B.
B as in brew.
That will get you, what does that get them again?
15% off.
Your entire order.
Right. Now, you might be saying, come on, Jeff, Dave, am I going to spend that much money on a coffee machine?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's cheap, but why would you want something that's part of your daily routine to be cheap?
Right, exactly.
You want something that's reliable, that's going to be I think it's pronounced heirloom, that you can give on to, the next generation of coffee drinkers.
That's exactly right. So I can't tell you how many years I went through the cheap plastic squirty types of machines, and those also kind of gathered on a shelf. What am I going to repair these? Come on, right. But these ratios are going to last me for a long, long time.
Absolutely.
So it's worth the expense.
Check it out.
This
episode of AdNavseam is also brought to you by the Hackett Publishing Company. Hackett, with offices in 2 of the great states of this great country, that is the state of Indiana and the state of Massachusetts, have been bringing fine editions, translations of the classics, plus many scholarly editions to the masses for, it's now 53
years.
Almost
52 years.
Almost 53 years.
Yep.
Jeff, can you just tell us briefly a couple of the things you like about Hackett?
It's over the almost 3 years we've been doing this podcast. Is I've really grown more and more to kind of love their editions. So listeners, those of you who have tuned into the Aeneid episodes, every time we did one, I was blown away by the Lombardo translation.
The quality of that translation,
right?
Very high.
The translations that we've used for our Metamorphoses episodes, also by Lombardo and Ambrose. It's I love this company that they will have such high quality stuff that's affordable, and I also love that they will have multiple translations of the same work by different authors.
Yeah, multiple titles of the same work.
Yes, you just don't see that.
No,
and they've been so good to us, and they've been so laid back. They've supported this podcast from almost the very, very beginning.
Yep.
Can't say enough.
Yeah, there's a lot of complaining. I hear a lot of complaining from certain quarters about the cancellation of certain parts of the Western tradition. Mm-hmm. Whether that's legitimate or not, the folks at Hackett, that's not what they're doing. They are supporting and promoting the greats of classical literature. They're there for everyone to enjoy, but it's not just that. They also have Islamic studies and Far East studies, Asian studies. They have South American studies. It's a real smorgasbord of things available.
Yeah, so do yourself a favor and go to hackettpublishing.com. That's HACKETT publishing.com, and just check out their huge catalog. It's extraordinary. And find the text that you want. Any text, doesn't have to be a classical title, anything that you want there. Drop it into the grocery basket, and if you type in the coupon code AN 2023 2023,
yes, the current year,
Dave, that will get them
20% off their order, their entire order, 20% off, and
free shipping.
Check it out.
All right, Dave, as we get back into it, why don't you read a little Latin for us from Cicero's De Senectuta?
I would love to do that. So this is from section 9 or paragraph 27, and it goes like this. Quae enim vox potest esse contemptior quam Milonis Crotoniatae, qui cum iam senex esset atletasque se exercentes in curriculo videret, aspexisset lacertus suos digitur in lacrimansque dixisse, at hi quidem mortui iam sunt? Non verotam isti quam tu ipsa nugator, neque enim ex te umquam es nobilitatus, sed ex lateribus et lacertis tuis.
Nicely done, as
Thank
always.
Thank you.
Now, this is interesting. He kind of does a 180 from his opinion of Milo than he used in the Pro Milone.
Right.
So before he used it as kind of a great example, that Milo's great, and so this Milo is great.
Right.
And here he used him as kind of a cautionary tale.
Well, because Cicero is a flexible orator.
That is true.
You're going to read us the translation?
Yes. He says, what cry can be more contemptible than that of Milo of Croton? When he had grown old, he saw some athletes training on the track, looked at his own arms, wept, and said, and these, indeed, are now dead. Not so, you idiot. It is you who are dead, for your nobility came not from yourself, but from your trunk. and your arms. He put all his eggs in the bicep basket.
Nice. Right? There's a phrase. I think that's going to be the title of my next book.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Eggs in the bicep basket.
Right.
Can you just see what the cover would look like?
Yeah, exactly. I can't.
It's a metaphor for something. Eggs in the bicep basket.
Yeah.
Catchy.
So he's saying...
but he should have done something else.
He should have done something else.
He should have gone to Hackett, bought some... Well, I guess the ads are over, right, but yeah. He should have expanded his mind, not just his upper arms.
Exactly, right. So, yes, sound mind and a sound body.
Yes.
All that Milo apparently cared about was the sound body.
Yeah, that's the juvenile quote, mens sana in corpore sano.
Right. And so Milo only paid attention to one half of that.
That's
equation.
Right.
And so, yeah.
So he becomes a figure for criticism.
Right.
What makes for the good life? It's both.
Yeah, exactly. And I wonder if this connects to, so many of the hero stories in Greek myth, they end rather sadly. And it always the most pathetic one in my mind is how Jason dies.
I was just thinking of Jason crushed beneath his own Argo.
Right, and so he's the rotting hull of his ship falls on his head after Medea has killed their two children. He's left with he's lost his bride to be.
But he's not a deserving hero. He's a total dud.
He is a dud.
I don't want him to get crushed by a ship. Right, it's like changing the oil and the car falls on you. It's terrible.
Yeah.
But he's not a very deserving hero.
No, he's not a deserving hero. But it reminds me of that. He's killed by the thing that he's most famous for, right? And so
by which he was obsessed.
Yeah, exactly. The only thing that kind of raises him maybe slightly above the level of dud was his time as the captain of the Argo.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that he's kind of, again, trapped in the past. Milo looks at his arms. He says, "This was my whole identity, and now." I've gone flabby.
Right.
There's the new crew is surpassing me now. Right.
What about Galen? What about the famous physician Galen?
Yes.
What does he tell us about Milo?
Galen says, "What surpassing witlessness not to realize even this much, that a short while before, when the bull was alive and the animal's mind held up its own body, which with much less exertion than Milo put forth. Furthermore, that the bull could even run as it held itself upright. Yet the bull's mind was not worth anything." Just about like Milo's.
Ooh.
So just kind of comparison that, that when Milo's carrying that bull around, he and the bull really aren't all that different.
Indistinguishable in sense.
Yes.
That's rough.
That is really rough. Was Galen having a bad day?
I don't know. It's a little bit of elitism, I guess.
Right.
Maybe he was jealous.
Right. So he becomes a kind of this cautionary tale of, if it's great to be physically strong, but you better develop the mind as well. Otherwise, it's going to be completely thrown out of balance.
Right. Can I read this one from Strabo?
Yes.
Okay. So Strabo was a historian and a geographer, among other things. One widely known story of his physical prowess told how he supported the crumbling pillar of a room in which followers of the famous philosopher Pythagoras were meeting. On this occasion, the intellectuals were very appreciative of Milo's strength, for he single-handedly, I guess double-handedly is a better way to put it, held up the ceiling while his friends managed to get out. Then he somehow managed to escape himself.
Yeah.
Like a bad 70s action movie.
It's totally like, I'm picturing Lou Ferrigno.
Right. Holds it up and then dives for the exit as the building collapses.
Crashes, right. So apparently one of the traditions about Milo is that he was a Pythagorean himself, which I mean, maybe...
That doesn't jive.
You're not buying it?
No, because they were vegetarians. We were told he ate, I don't know how many minae of beef.
Right, and a whole cow, a whole bull in one day.
Right, killed it and then ate it.
Yeah, that's not a very good Pythagorean.
No,
it's very
that's
inconsistent.
Not. We have an episode about that, right? No meat for us, please. We're Pythagoreans.
That's right. That was right. Exactly. You're right. So that doesn't square.
Doesn't jive.
No.
Maybe he came to Pythagoreanism late.
Maybe
when he was no longer a competitive athlete.
Exactly. Maybe he was impressed by these guys that he saved by holding up.
Could be
right.
Other tales we want to know.
Right. So there's other kind of famous anecdotes. He would challenge people. He'd hold his arm out with his fingers outstretched and said, "See if you could even bend my little finger." And
I don't like the way that sounds.
You don't like that?
No, that's sometimes used in other ways, but
I got the pull my finger.
Oh, that's right.
Right.
Or he would stand on a greased iron disc and challenge people to push him off of it,
and he would stay on it somehow.
That's incredible.
Bizarre. Or he would hold a pomegranate in a hand and say, "Hey,
in one hand, right?
and say, "See if you can take it from me."
Right.
And nobody ever could take it out of his hand. So
I've heard of that one before. That's impressive.
Yeah.
And apparently the pomegranate would not be damaged, right?
Right.
He had such forearm strength. He could just hold it there delicately.
But still nobody could pluck it from his hand.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So other stories, I think we alluded to earlier that later in his life, he took up arms against the Cimmerians. apparently were kind of a tribal rival to his hometown. And he went out there dressed like Heracles and with a lion skin on with a club. And he helped his hometown army beat back an army 3 times the size.
Wasn't that a little bit of just showing off, or what was the purpose of the Hercules costume? Is that cosplay?
I guess so. It reminds me a bit of Alexander, right? Where he too kind of saw himself as Heracles
dressed
reborn,
in a lion skin.
Dressed in a lion skin, depicted himself as Heracles. So maybe it went beyond cosplay. That maybe Milo, he kind of believed his own press.
Could be
that he was Heracles reborn.
So this is recorded for us by Diodorus Siculus.
And then a number of other sources attest to other victories that he had, that he won 7 times in the Pythian Games, 10 times in the Isthmian Games, 9 times in the Nemean Games. Strabo, and elsewhere in his geography, calls him the most illustrious athlete of all time. Pliny the Elder, says he was invincible in all his athletic contests. Julius Solinus says that he died the victor of all competitions, so kind of undefeated to the very, very end.
Right. So Milo's fame has endured through the centuries.
Right.
As it turns out, there is a young man, I don't know his exact age, here in the town of Grand Rapids, whom I tutored in Greek for a time. I think it was a year ago. His name is Milo.
Is that right?
Yeah. So this name is, and I couldn't teach him Greek without thinking of this great athletic character.
Yeah.
So that was charming. But
that is, yes.
This name is making a little bit of a comeback, actually.
It is. It's kind of making those kind of those popular lists.
Right.
All right. Interesting.
So do you have a favorite athlete? Do you have someone who for you is the kind of Milo?
The athletes that
We've talked a lot about baseball.
We have. My favorite athletes were never. I always, we talked about, we want our heroes to be down to earth.
Right.
I always gravitate towards the heroes who demonstrated kind of beyond the press that they were decent human beings.
Okay.
So a basketball player that I really admired and continue to admire is, do you remember Steve Kerr?
Yes.
Played on the Bulls.
Yes.
And he's since become a
coach of the something.
He just seems to be, he was never, he's not a Hall of Famer.
No.
But he was
little for the game.
A small guy, a great 3-point shooter. But nobody would say Steve Kerr is in the top, 100 greats of all time.
No.
But he just seems to be such a decent human being and a smart, a well-regarded coach. That's the kind of people that's the kind of the first name that pops to mind. How about you? You got a favorite athlete?
Boy, that's a tough one. I liked watching football a lot as a kid, professional football, and I emulated the running backs, the star players who would make the big plays and, shed all the defenders and race into the end zone.
Sure.
That was impressive. But as I've grown older, I think I've gravitated toward less popular sports, probably, with the exception of golf. I can't get into golf. But I like tennis a lot. I like the sport of chess. I like to tell people chess is a sport. They just shake their head at me, but track and field, these kinds of things.
Yeah. I loved Carl Lewis growing up. I thought that he was amazing. Yeah.
Florence Griffith Joyner, the famous sprinter. Fantastic. I've always admired her accomplishments.
I loved Kirk Gibson, the
baseball player for the Tigers,
right? And the Dodgers and other teams. But Mr. Clutch. I just thought, people who can, that Hemingway phrase, grace under pressure.
Yes.
People who can stand up there, down 3-2, bases loaded, and can pull it off. That makes my mind explode.
Right. Famous boxers. Like some of the famous boxers. Also, it used to be a very popular sport. Now it's not very popular, I understand.
Yeah.
But
kind of maybe overtaken by, MMA and cage fighting.
That's correct. Right. Ultimate fighting.
Right.
So did Milo of Croton, did he have a kind of a pathetic end? What happened to him?
He did. So this comes from a paper I found by one Tom Stevenson, simply called Milo of Croton. I thought summarized the tradition about his end very well. He writes...
You going to read that for us?
Yes. Ultimately, our sources indicate that Milo's pride and his great strength brought about his downfall. That's a fairly typical morality play around the world, right? The veracity of the evidence is difficult to assess, for it is surely informed by a theme running through Greek literature from the time of Homer about the fate that awaits men who rely solely or too much on their physical strength. It appears that one day Milo was walking in the countryside near Croton, when by chance he came upon a withered tree into which wedges had been driven in order to split the trunk. Milo thought that he would finish the job, and so put his hands, and perhaps feet, into the cleft in the tree trunk, and tried to pull the trunk apart by his own strength. Unfortunately, the wedges slipped out, and the tree trunk sprang back together, holding him in an unbreakable grip. He was a prisoner of the old tree, an easy prey for the wolves, which roamed the area in great numbers.
Ooh.
That's grisly.
That is gruesome.
So the tree didn't kill him. It just trapped him there so the animals could come and just gnaw off a piece at a time.
At their leisure.
That's horrible.
So I think you can drive these wedges into the tree, and then each day you drive the wedge a little bit deeper, and slowly the tree comes apart.
Yeah.
He thought he'd do it himself, and he just got trapped.
Yeah, it's awful. I think we did an episode a long time ago on like the death myths. And I think we talked about this one.
I don't remember talking about it. I remember the episode on the death myths.
Yeah, I think we did refer to this one.
Okay.
But it's and you can often tell perhaps what a culture thinks about a particular person by the story they tell about how they die.
Right.
So Milo, I mean, he quickly kind of gets folded into kind of the cautionary tale about don't rely on one thing of your aspect.
Right.
But compare it to the story about Sophocles, who dies performing the Antigone as a one-man show at age 90, right?
Right.
And at the height of his glory. And so with Milo, he doesn't die, picking up one last giant boulder. Right. He dies in this weird, pathetic kind of way with a tree.
But it's comma tragic because he dies trying to demonstrate his great strength.
Yes, but in a kind of a weird, awkward, kind of off the cuff kind of way.
Does that have the ring of truth to it?
Maybe. I mean, I think it's still more. He dies pathetically because, he made this moral mistake of relying too much on his arms throughout his life. But yeah.
Well, we have to start wrapping things up here, don't we, Jeff?
We do.
So should we talk a little bit about his Nachleben?
Yeah. So I mean,
Milo was a great speaker of German, we know.
Exactly. Just to say that from the Italian Renaissance through up until kind of the early 20th century. Milo was a popular theme for artists and sculptors. And so there's a number of paintings and sculptures of Milo, and almost exclusively depicting his end.
Yes.
And him kind of being trapped by the tree and then going to keep coming around with these animals coming around. There's a kind of a grotesque kind of painting by Joseph Benoit Sauvé.
This is 18th century, right?
Right. Which shows him with his kind of hand trapped in the tree, and these various animals and wolves coming sniffing around. I was reading one...
Starting to gnaw on him, in fact.
Right.
More than sniffing, if I'm reading this, if I'm looking at this picture correctly.
Right. One commentator says that Milo almost becomes kind of the new Laocoon. And so, again, we're looking at this painting in front of us, listener, but you can see that he's kind of twisted and contorted in the way that Laocoon is in that famous statue group from the 2nd century.
Yes, this is the story, just so we're all on the same page. From Aeneid, Book 2, Laocoon and his sons who are killed by snakes.
Yes.
And then that statue group, the Hellenistic copy that you're talking about from the Vatican Museum.
Yes, exactly, right. So he becomes that notion of kind of the pathetic end, kind of the cautionary tale. That seems to be the aspect of Milo's story that Renaissance artists and beyond kind of seize upon for whatever reason.
And I guess that there aren't paintings of famous athletes anymore, but sports photography is a massive field. Right?
Sure.
And I guess there's something about the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat, and can the photographer catch the athlete in that moment, where they go from average to exceptional.
Exactly.
And that mix of desire on their face and pain as they're pushing their body beyond normal limits.
Yes.
Just for you and me, just another normal day at the office, basically.
Right. Or I think what they often, those great photographs catch is kind of the seeming ease which the athlete feels in the midst of doing something incredible.
Right.
So I think that famous, it's more famous now as a silhouette of Jordan, kind of jumping from the free throw line with his legs,
right, his arms outstretched.
Exactly right.
Kind of like Vitruvian Man. Now that I think about it.
Totally right.
I'm sure someone else has noticed that.
But I wonder if
that's what it is. It's the famous Da Vinci drawing of the Vitruvian Man based on the Arte Architectura of Vitruvius, where man is a sphere or is a perfect circle. I mean to say,
but the argument that the famous Jordan Jump Man, as it's called, is someone to make the argument that one of the reasons we're drawn to that is because I think we inherently see the Vitruvian Man in that. I would buy that argument. There's something kind of perfect about it, right? The balance in it, and also just kind of the ease of kind of just Jordan flying through the air. Or on the other end of the spectrum, that famous photograph of Ali standing over his defeated opponent,
right?
Where he kind of has his fist kind of curled. He's kind of got that kind of grimace on his face.
Yes,
he's just beat this guy.
Right.
That moment of kind of triumph.
It's primordial.
It is.
Would say.
It's very primordial. Yep. Exactly.
So we have one more work of art here to mention. This is a statue group by Pierre Puget.
Yeah, Pierre Puget, 17th century, and a similar kind of thing where we see Milo.
It's a bronze group, right?
Yes, and his hand is caught in the tree, and then we have a lion coming up behind him and starting to chomp on him, and we see kind of that contorted grimace of agony on his face.
Right. Have you seen this one in person?
I have not.
Okay.
This was just kind of from kind of looking around and doing some internet research.
Right. I think this one is in the Louvre.
Is it?
But when I was there, I think we didn't even get to spend one entire day. And it was packed, so it was very hard to see things. So I don't think I actually got to see this one.
I've never been there. I've never been to. Okay.
I was so eager to see it, but just the circumstances weren't right. This was January of 20. So we did get to see the Mona Lisa before it was covered with, I don't know, paint or soup or something. Anyway,
yeah.
And
so it was even packed in January.
It was busy.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Saw some great things, but I could spend 3 days probably in the museum.
Of course.
But the group I was with, they weren't as interested.
Gotcha.
You know how it goes.
Yep. Hey, we got to get out of here.
Yes, we got to wrap this up. Do we not?
Before we do, Dave, tell us a little bit about the Moss method, would you?
Yeah, so the Moss method is a program I have developed for studying ancient Greek. It takes you from neophyte to erudite, which means you start out as a tender little shoot of Greek with little or no knowledge, and by the end, you have gained, I won't say mastery, but a massive amount of knowledge. And the reason is, using the 19th century textbook of Charles Moss, I have developed this program which gets you reading Greek from the first day. You learn a few forms of the verb and of the noun, and then you dive right in to great stories from the classical world. And I have been, studying and teaching Greek for almost 30 years, and I put everything I know basically into this course.
Fantastic. So if someone's interested, where should they go?
They go to mossmethod.com, not to be confused with Randy Moss, the former NFL player who has his own program, not for Greek. Go to Moss Method, check out the free videos that I have. There are many, 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 hundreds, in fact, on my YouTube channel, just in Greek. And then see if this program is for you. It's $350, and I've said before, I'll say again, there may be a better program. I'm not qualified to say, let the customer decide. But in terms of value, I'm quite sure there isn't a better value.
Fantastic. How about the LLPSI?
Yes, so you can learn Latin with me ab initio from the ground up with the Lingua Latina per se illustrata course and textbook by Hans Orberg. Go to latinperdiem.com and check out this course. It's $250. 33 different instructional videos. You've got assignments and quizzes and vocab and weekly office hours with me as with the Greek program.
And the videos you're teaching in front of
I'm
students,
teaching
right?
in front of students. Yep. They're asking questions, the questions you probably have about Latin. You get to email me, text if you want, interact in a variety of ways. There's really no reason not to learn one of these languages at this point.
Fantastic. All right, before we go, we got people to thank.
We do. We want to thank Mishka, our fabulous sound engineer, who puts these episodes together so quickly and accurately.
Yep, and also the guys behind the great music that you hear.
Right.
Your buddy and maybe hero, apparently, Ken Taylor.
Well, I mean, musically, yeah.
Okay,
I'm just admire his virtuosity. Anybody that can do something really well, I'm in awe of that.
Yeah, and Scott Vincent too, who you also know. I'm jealous of this.
Well, I got to meet him. I wouldn't say I really know
him. All right.
But I got to meet him, and we've exchanged emails and so forth, but he's an acquaintance.
So. Even so, I'm a little jealous. I would love to meet Ken and Scott someday.
I'd be happy to have your jealousy.
I'm waiting for an
I don't think it's going to happen,
introduction. All right. So
they provide all the great music, and we're grateful.
Yes. So hey, if you want to get in touch, if you want a shout out, we haven't had a shout out for a few episodes now.
It's been a while.
Right. So drop a note you can write to Dave at AdNavseam.com. Don't forget the V.
Or Jeff at AdNavseam.com. Do not forget the V.
Yep.
Send us ideas for episodes. Send us criticisms. Send us tirades and rants. We might read some of them. Can't promise you.
Yeah.
But we'd love to hear from you.
Yes, we do.
So what are we going to do in episode 126?
Are we? This is also TBD?
It's TBD.
All right.
To be determined.
We're kind of on that loose summer schedule.
A little bit, yeah. We're going to get into something more serious at some point. We promised to talk about classical education.
Yes.
1 or 2 episodes. We're going to head toward Greek tragedy at some point and cover those in depth.
Definitely.
But we're just keeping it loose for now.
Sounds good.
And Jeff, I believe you have the gustatory parting shot.
Yes, this comes from the very laconic Stephen Wright, who said, "I went to a restaurant that serves breakfast at any time, so I ordered French toast during the Renaissance." Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.